Yeah,
Sick.
you'll hear him barking at some point for sure.
Nice.
Okay, welcome back to Big Riff Energy. I am here with the rhythm section of Nite, who have put out an album that's going to be hard to beat for me this year. Go ahead and introduce yourself, guys. We can see your name on there, but just tell us your name and what you do in the band.
I'm Patrick Crawford. I play the drums in Nite.
And my name is Avinash Matur, and I play bass in Nite.
Right on. It's a Big Riff Energy first, talking to the rhythm section. I'm very excited. This is a special approach here. Um, Man, I'm gonna nerd out on you guys. I'm gonna get cerebral like right out of the gate. And cerebral in this case is kind of like a euphemism for super dorky as hell. But you posted a Decibel interview that my friend Brad wrote that was great, and he sort
Yeah.
of focused on the word blackened because you guys are pitched as a blackened heavy metal band, which I think is accurate. And so I that got me kind of thinking. I'm like super picky with black metal, and then also like I'm just going to be honest, 99% of the time when I see a band pitched as black and so and so, whether it's like black and thrash, black and death metal, black and doom, to me, it kind of just means like growly, screechy vocals, tremolo picking, spooky, evil aesthetic or whatever. Whereas in this case, I feel like there's something a little deeper and more conceptual going on. So I started thinking, and I promise this question will end someday, so just bear with me.
I love it
Uh,
so far. Great.
I love where it's going. Yeah.
I started thinking about characteristics that define the black metal that I do like and where that kind of intersects with like old school metal. And I was just thinking of like the scripters, and what I get from this record is powerful, majestic, epic, melodic, and mystical. And I think those are things that my favorite black metal has in common with old school metal, which I kind of more am a fan of, just like old school traditional metal. Was that did that seem to be like a clear goal or a clear vision from the beginning, or did that just sort of like unfold naturally as you guys started writing songs?
I would say that it was a very organic process. And like most bands, the aesthetic and the sound comes from the culmination of the songwriter and then the rest of the band, coming together to make that music. But I would say in this case, our lead vocalist and lead guitarist, Van Labrakis, is the main songwriter. I will say that he definitely had a vision for this band. So prior to um, myself even joining, I'm an original member. Avi came in on our second album, Voices of the Cronian Moon. The band always was traditional heavy metal with black metal vocals. You always need like a pitch, like a sales pitch. People need a really easy bite-sized thing to understand what you're doing or what you're attempting to do. I think in our case, we always knew it was going to sound like this, and we had a very clear vision and a clear goal. And I think the fact that it translates, like the words that you use to describe our sound are exactly what we're going for when we're
Sweet.
when we're demoing, when we're writing, when we're recording. So it's great that that is coming through. And I will say that for sure with this album cycle, it has been much more apparent and prevalent in just the feedback we're getting that people are getting it, are connecting with what we're trying to do. I think we all come from a very traditional heavy metal background in that that's the music we love. We love the music of, what's called proto metal, 70s kind of, hard rock, 80s heavy metal that we always want to celebrate and kind of like put in the forefront. But to us, having that blackened kind of like grizzled, growly, vocal style uh is modern heavy metal to us. Not there's anything wrong with clean vocals either. Like we love clean vocals too, but for us it just made the most sense to have that vocal over this type of music. So does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, and we were talking before I started recording. most, I don't know if most, but some of my favorite black metal is the Greek stuff. So like Rotting Christ and Varathron. And we were talking about, all those descriptors I just used. That's what makes those kind of black metal bands stand out to me is um, I don't want to say more accessible, but there's just hooks and there's melody and it's like really epic. And yeah, it's almost like that Greek thing is you can't escape it. And I was gonna ask Van as well, like when I'm writing leads or melodies or something like that, it's almost like I can't escape the Thin Lizzy thing with the Irish heritage or something, and it's almost like that Greek melodicism and epic those modes and scales and everything. It's just like inescapable in a really good way, And that
Sure.
I don't know, that seems to bridge the gap between black metal and traditional, melodic heavy metal. So yeah, that's a great answer. Let's see here. Yeah, I was going to ask about the vocal approach because obviously he's not with us, but maybe you guys can give some insight there.
Mhm.
It's
For
kind of
sure.
tricky these days to come up with a vocal that's unique. And his vocal has always really stood out to me because it's not clean, but it's like a little more accessible than like a screechy black metal or like a guttural death metal vocal. And especially on the new one,
Mm.
I feel like he's leaning more into even like a Lemmy kind of. It's almost like if Lemmy was, has he ever brought up Lemmy's vocals?
Vance brought up Lemmy always whenever folks compare him to Lemmy. And he's always like, that's such a huge compliment. And the idea of being compared to such a legend is humbling. That's when he always describes, that's when he always brings up Lemmy. But on this album, Van really, he wanted to step it up. I know that. Pat knows that too. He put in a lot of work on this record. And he's always taken a very humble and like yeah, just very careful approach to his vocals because he knows they're extreme metal vocals. They're not. It's not Bruce Dickinson. It's not Paul Di'Anno. It is something that people really had to love this kind of stuff to connect with, and so he wants to make it easy for folks to get there. But he put a lot of effort into this album with his vocals. And again, you've noted that he was born in Greece and English is a second or third language for him. He always ran like the enunciation, his vocabulary choice by the rest of the band, and has always been like, hey, like, does this make sense? Like, am I saying this right? Is this clear? Am I conveying this right? So, yeah, it's not just the tone of the voice, but it's also the clarity and the diction in which he wants to convey it to, you know?
And I mean,
That's
at one
awesome.
point, yeah, at one point he had like four different vocal coaches
Oh,
preparing for this
wow.
album because he really, I'm just piggybacking on what Avi's saying here. Like, there was a moment kind of between the second and third album, where we were playing more shows and we were just bringing together the live presentation of the band more. And it was apparent at a certain point that he really needed to step the vocal up a notch. And, this was not a recording project. This was always meant to be a live band. So he really had to dig in and do a lot of work to get his vocal up to that level where not only translated in a live format and context, but also like he wanted it to be that much more of a powerful instrument on the new album. So yeah, thank you for noticing.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been in the same position. When I started Spirit Adrift, I really was not prepared to be singing that style in that band. Not saying he wasn't, but I've just been in the position where I feel like there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for, having four vocal coaches and like really putting that effort into it. And I always wonder if that shows. I always kind of wonder like, is this improvement coming across? So I can tell you like the work and effort that he put into those vocals, it definitely comes across.
Awesome.
And it's
Brad.
cool you mentioned like his focus on like enunciation and stuff like that. Cause I almost kind of think for heavy music, sometimes it's almost like an advantage if English isn't your first language and you're singing in English. I think of Max Cavalera, guys like that, and the way that they oh, there it is. Yeah, yeah. Like the song Carry On, even just the way that he says carry on, nah. And there's like that thing at the end. It's so sick, man. Again, it's like an extreme vocal, but it's somehow empowering and like
Yeah.
but positive in a weird way, and I think that's like an enunciation thing.
And
But
the
I don't want
thing,
to waste too much time talking about him. We got
no,
the rhythm
well,
section here.
the last thing I'd say about that is another great example of that is Luca from Necrot. I
Yes,
I love the way he takes a very Italian approach to singing the English words, and to your point, it makes it unique. And so, like for me, Luca's really been a touch point with Van to be like, hey, Luca does this really well. And not that he's trying to sing like Luca or be that, but I'm just saying embrace your sort of heritage and your natural way of speaking. Because it becomes a really, yeah, unique set of tools that only you have. And it's
exactly. I agree 100%, man. My next question, believe it or not, you guys are an old school rhythm section, like in the best possible way. It's tasteful and it like totally at all times is serving the song. And uh I would just say like you guys are both playing the exact right thing like at all times. Like it's tasteful when it needs to be tasteful. It kind of explodes and goes off when it needs to go off. Avi, there's that part in the Mystic, like right before what I call the David Gilmour gasm, where you're like where you just you don't really do like a solo, but you just like start doing a driving riff. You guys are locked in when you need to be locked in. There's badass fills when it needs to build and stuff like that. So, uh, two-part question, I guess, like how much do you guys work with each other on that, and what are some touchstone like rhythm sections that you find yourself talking about?
Oh boy, Pat and I talk about rhythm sections every single practice. Well, we'll get to that, but first off, I mean, it's an ongoing conversation with me and Pat. I can think of the song Crow, where just about every single part of that song, we tried out a different rhythm section approach to it. One where like I had Pat beat the clock, where I'd follow his accents, like hitting the crashes. Others where I would turn into the clock and hit more eighth notes and just keep barreling through.
Now, Crow has like the old school four on the floor, eighth note on the bass guitar. That's a shining example of what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and just about every song that we put together for this album, we'd have those conversations, literally like verse by verse, chorus by chorus, to figure out what works. And we'd try stuff in the studio too, and take a couple different approaches there. But Pat, I will say, is the first drummer I played with in my time as a musician that I've truly felt that rhythm section connection with. Because in extreme metal bands before as a bass player, and this having played in extreme bands too, sometimes you turn into like another rhythm guitar, and sometimes you just kind of follow what they're doing. Or against the drummer doing blast beats, it can be really hard to kind of lock in with that. But the first time I jumped in the room with Pat, I was like, oh no, this is the pulse. This is what I need to be paying attention to. And so that was huge for me as a bass player, and it's totally informed our conversations left and right. And even just nerding out of practice too. Like, I mean, Deep Purple's one that comes up really often. Um, before going into before going into this album, Pat had done a cover set with that other band, Glitter Wizard, playing all Deep Purple tunes. And so that really influenced his feel going into the album. At that same time, I was also learning a bunch of Roger Glover bass lines because I was like, yeah, Rickenbacker pick, that's not a bad reference. And so, at least for me, that was a big rhythm section kind of duo that like I was looking to be like, okay, let's see if we can get something closer to that on this new one.
but
How
also,
how tough was it to do a whole fucking Deep Purple set on drums, dude? I
dude,
saw we both shook our heads.
I seriously think I rehearsed almost a full year to get ready for one show. It was gnarly. I like Ian Pace is such a distinctive like drummer in my mind because his style he's lightning fast. Single stroke rolls are just like blazing, but he's got this feel that is intuitive, but not necessarily like what I would do, right? Like as a drummer, I'm a much different player than someone like Ian Pace. And to have to sort of like learn those fills and I mean just to play Burn. Like Burn was like it's such a workout like to just be doing like cool like I got like 36 bars of fills for a whole fucking verse like it was just nuts. And so for me it's great to get out of your comfort zone. That's why I love playing covers and playing cover sets because it forces you outside of your what you would normally do in your everyday musician life. And I learned a ton. But I will say like the rhythm section connection with Avi too is very much influenced by the fact that Avi is also a drummer, not only a bassist. So
Right.
speaking that same language with someone who's like kind of like rhythm section to his core, it's a lot easier, and he just so he understands not only kind of like what I'm playing and why I'm playing it, but also how it feels. You know what I mean? Like he can watch me doing something and be like, "Oh, like I know how that feels on the drum, so I'm really gonna like lean into the two and the four on that part or whatever." So, yeah, it's great. It's great to have that sort of common language and that really easy like connection with somebody.
Yeah, I've always contended. I think of TJ from Inner Arma a lot. Someone that has an understanding or can at least play in a rudimentary sense, like the multiple instruments required to be in like a rock band or whatever.
Totally.
It creates like a cycle of more and more in-depth understanding and like intuitive ability to like feel where someone else's accents are or where the accents of the
Sure.
riff are or something. So that explains a lot. I didn't even think about the cross-pollination of two drummers,
Yeah,
one
totally.
of whom is playing bass. Yeah, it comes across, man. It's super
Awesome.
tight. It gives
Awesome.
me like I hate to keep throwing out names, but I'm a nerd. It's just what I
Go for
do.
it.
It's not it's like a Phil Rudd Bonham
Uh,
hybrid jamming with like a Phil Lynott type approach on bass, just very, very tasteful, man.
Yes,
you're
I
great.
love
We love those fills.
a lot of fills that we love.
Yeah, the two Phils. I didn't even think about it.
Phil and Phil rocking
So
together.
I
Bunch of
wrote
fills.
down light and shade, man. And I was running out back listening to the record today just to kind of like refresh and
Mhm.
think of some kind of non-generic questions. And I kept thinking about Led Zeppelin, and maybe because it was just like what the 50th anniversary of Physical Graffiti.
Mhm.
And I think that might be my favorite Zeppelin album. It's up there. I came in here and like put on In the Light. Um, there's a lot of light and shade with you guys on this new record represented, and I see you laughing already. Is that another nerdy thing that we all reference?
Yeah. It's a great nerdy thing that we talk about really in a lot of detail that the band conceptually is about contrast, right? So everything from the band name, Nite, you know, suggests these sort of like very like dark and spooky and scary things. And yeah, sure, great. That goes very well for a heavy metal band to be called Nite. But for us, it's a lot about you can't have any kind of, lightness without darkness. So we need to really explore the darkness in order to find the light. So we're in no way a evil, satanic occult band. We're just normal fucking nerdy musicians, as you pointed out, because we love all your nerdy questions. That like we're trying to explore just sort of different like thematic structures within like the lyrics, within the sort of like the color of the riffs and the composition. So for us, it all comes back to contrast, and that also speaks to even the musical style, right? Like the traditional heavy metal with black metal vocals. Again, it's that contrast that makes it unique and makes it, in our minds, sort of like different as than what a lot of other people are doing. And so for us, it's a great sort of touchstone to always think about, light and the darkness, the contrast between black and white. And like for us, it's like a really great reminder of kind of like what are we trying to do here? If something seems a little mushy or unclear or like we're not being very like concise in maybe what we're saying. So it's something like song lengths is something we talk about all the time. The structure of a record, the pacing of an album. Like we just want to be very decisive and clear and make sure that there's a very obvious contrast in everything we do.
It's coming across, man. And even in the lyrics, you have one song that's talking about how death is the only thing that's eternal. Then you have another song that's like urging the listener to carry on. It's I love it. It's the
Totally.
full spectrum of the human experience.
For
I love
sure.
that you brought up the sequencing too, because we're getting to that as well. As far as the mix, like I saw that Van mixed it and you guys produced it as a band. I had a question about the mix. Were you guys like somewhat involved in that process?
Yeah, so Van ran the sessions, he ran the mix himself, but he was always sending stuff to us for feedback continuously. So, the way it would work would, Van recorded it and then he'd do like an initial mix. He'd get it to a point where it's like, okay, guys, I'm ready for this kind of feedback. It might be like, hey, can you tell me how you like the drum tones? Like, is the snare bright enough? Is the kick bright enough, et cetera, et cetera. How do you, but then you get into even tiny detailed things like, hey, did I hold this guitar note in the solo long enough, Um, or even the bass tone, he was asked me things like, hey, like, should we try a little more distortion on this song? Should we try a little more like subs here, et cetera, et cetera? So we were all involved as far as giving our feedback, but Van was in the driver's seat the entire time. And he, as a good mix engineer does, he added all sorts of wild stuff and all sorts of effects and just additional production flourishes that we'll probably keep discovering as we keep listening to the album more and more.
Dude, you predicted my question and you almost answered it entirely. Like, so I was sitting in here listening to Physical Graffiti the other night. I think I have an original pressing, but I'm not sure, but it's like an early one. Um, and there's something about those 70s records, and particularly like Led Zeppelin's not my favorite band, but in a lot of ways, I think at one point they were the best band, even though they're not really like my favorite, you know?
Sure.
But I listened to the mixes, and it's, I experienced it with Pink Floyd and Sabbath to a certain degree, but something about Zeppelin where it's such an active mix. And for anybody who's like younger listening to this, before Pro Tools and all that stuff, you have like what they would call like all hands on deck. And everybody in the band and the tape op and the intern and whoever was there is like the song's playing and they all have like moves, planned out moves. So on this part, and so if you listen to like In the Light on Physical Graffiti, there's a part where the guitar gets like way louder. There's a part where Robert Plant goes from sounding like he's in a big room to sounding like he's in like a glass bottle or something. And it's just it's such an active approach to mixing, as if mixing the record is like another instrumentation
It
almost.
becomes another performance, right? Like,
Yeah, and I feel that. I feel that from this record, man, and I don't feel that from very many records anymore. I've not knocking anybody, but unless it's like Joe Barresi or some old school Brendan O'Brien or somebody like that, it seems like the thing now, because everything's digital and easy, is like people plug everything in, turn their plugins on, set the levels, do this. There might be a little bit of automation here and there, bring up a guitar solo, but what y'all are doing with the mix is like old school, active. And it, like you said, what happens then is, there's an instantaneous appeal to the songs. There's an urgency to the songs. But there's also like a depth that where it just gives it like infinite listenability. I'm sorry, I wasn't gonna fanboy out this hard, god damn it, but I
I,
can't
I
help
mean,
it.
we don't need to say anything. You can just talk about how great our album is. So I think the real story behind everything you're saying and how I think we get to this point with this record is again Van coming from a studio, lineage. Like he was working in studios in Europe. He's been an engineer for the past 25 years. He's actually, mixed and mastered a bunch of albums for Season of Mist and a lot of other independent labels. So he comes from that very old school mentality of like being in the studio and using the studio as an instrument. Because really it's just another tool, it's just another instrument that helps you sort of, craft what you're trying to say with a song or with an album. And I think that for this record in particular, like he really wanted to add a lot of like little flourishes and little like Easter eggs and little things that like maybe at first listen you don't really notice. And like Avi was saying, sometimes even we would listen to a mix and be like, was there like a glockenspiel in there? What the hell was that? Like he'll
I
sneak
heard
these
it.
things
I
in.
fucking heard it, man.
So I mean, and that's the other thing too is like Van works. He is a music teacher at a school here in San Francisco, and so he has access to like all the instruments in the band room. And so like he's sending us these demos where it's like he's on a fucking like piano in the like in the band room playing this like ballad or something, and we're just like, what the hell is this? But it all ends up in the record. It all feeds into like using some little part of like there's definitely, there's a piano, there's tons of synth, there's all these bells, there's all these like effects and noises and things that we just, came across through being able to have that time and space, having the studio be this thing that's not packed into a week, right? We get to sort of experiment and use our studio that we have. And, it's a blessing and a curse to kind of like mix your own record, record your own record, because it can go on forever. But I will say that Van is a great editor. And as Avi said, like he's great at reaching out when he kind of gets to his saturation point. He's like, okay, guys, I've done all I can. Help me, help me finish this record. So it's a great collaborative effort too. So like, it doesn't feel like we're not involved, even though for sure he is the one doing the actual recording and mixing and mastering, and he involves us, as much as as much as is possible.
I am so relieved and glad that you just told me he's been making records for 25 years because I I
Yeah,
record shit on my own and I'm like, why does this suck so bad? And I hear this record, I'm like, what the fuck is this guy doing? So thank you.
yeah,
That makes me
yeah.
feel a lot better.
And like I said, I think you like similar to like just playing your instrument for a long time, like you learn so much, through the years of sort of what not to do or like how to do things very on, more primitive tools, right? Like recording reel to reel versus recording digital. Like everything we're doing is digital, but having that background of knowing how, you know, a non-digital studio functions and works is great. It's because you can sort of use those experiences to feed into your like, current sort of modern approach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a dying art form.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right. Okay, sequencing, man. Uh 8 songs, 37 minutes. You're speaking my language. To me is like perfect. That's like reminds me of Ride the Lightning or Diary of a Madman or the first Ozzy record. To me, the sequencing is like perfect. It's tricky to make a record that is very obviously like if a person were to hear any random song from the record has an identity. You can tell
Mm,
what record it's from. There's a
mhm.
cohesion to everything, but then simultaneously having 8 songs where each song provides something a little different and it never really gets monotonous. And the journey of the record is like exactly how I would have structured it. You got the classic like track 4 like ballad sort of.
Yeah, yeah,
Was
totally.
it like obvious from the get-go what the sequencing was going to be, or did you guys play around with it?
I wouldn't say it was obvious. The one thing that was obvious was I think the Mystic is track four. That was the one where no arguments there. But we did try a bunch of stuff out, and we did this with Voice of the Chronia Moon too, where all of us made a playlist of what we thought the sequencing should be. And we'd find like a couple common points between all of us. Again, Mystic is number four. I think all of us stuck the last blade on side B, etc. Same thing with Winds of Sokar. I think that made it to side B for a lot of folks as well. But no, we had a lot of debate back and forth, but this is my recollection of this. Sorry, Pat. But
No, go ahead. I'm laughing because I'm remembering some of my song
It's
order.
one of the hardest parts sometimes.
Yeah.
yeah, what I remember vividly is that there was one weekend when me and Van and Scott were going back and forth, like blah blah blah, tons of chatter. Pat comes in a couple days later saying, "Guys, you all missed it. This is it. Cult of the Serpent Sun has to open this album." And we were like, "Oh, damn it. Yeah, I got it." Yeah, it was just this kind of it was a fun way to sequence the conversation because normally you'd think everyone's going back and forth, but Pat jumping in 3 days later, kind of with fresh ears and letting us kind of settle down a little bit. We were like, "Damn it, you're right." Like this track one, and all of a sudden we
That's
just blew away the other playlists, and we were able to kind of start building from there. And that's
that's
when
awesome. I totally forgot about that. I love that you remember because I was like I was sitting here thinking about all of the recommendations I had for the song order that totally didn't make the record. Like I was like convinced Last Blade should be song three. I lost that one obviously, but like um I think having that sort of, we're all very opinionated people in this band, which is great. We're all huge music fans and music nerds, which is great. But it makes some of these conversations a little challenging because we're like, we come in pretty strong with like, no, it has to be this way. And like, I think the maturity of sort of being a little bit older and a little more seasoned and knowing that it's a collaboration. Like we're not, nobody's like dying on the hill of like, it has to be like this. But like, I think it's good to come in with a really strong opinion and really be able to back it up and say, hey, I think the sequence should be this way because, and we all listen to each other and we all kind of have a dialogue. But yeah, that was a months long process finding the right order. So like again, thank you for noticing that we put a lot of time and effort into how this should unfold. And to your point about the album length and the not only the sequencing and the pacing, but like it's to me I agree under 40 minutes, 8 songs, and it all comes from vinyl, right? Like that's we grew up listening to these albums that were written and produced to fit on one record and to be like I'm not advocating that album-oriented rock should be what we all aspire to, but like there's something sort of very comfortable and natural and like obvious feeling about it. So we've really been whittling down our kind of approach each record to make sure it's the right length, it's the right amount of time, and it just feels, it feels like it should have always been this way. So that's always the goal.
I'm an album guy, man. I mean, I'm kind of an old soul. I got into music really before like downloading was a thing, and I started noticing with streaming services that it's almost gotten to the point if you type in an album title, even if there's nothing else, even if there's not an artist with the same name or a song with the same name, it's almost like these streaming services will present you with the format of an album last. They'll do anything, and I don't know why that is. It's like they're pushing singles on
Mhm.
people, and I started seeing that approach like infiltrating our world, like underground metal, and I'm like, what are we doing, man? And it's hard to take yourself out of your own perception and your own age and your own experience sometimes that like there's kids that are probably as passionate as music about any of us that just weren't presented music in the form of albums. And to me, I don't, just personally speaking, that's kind of like a tragedy. Uh, so I really appreciate bands that are like making fucking albums. Like you guys have some obvious singles on there.
Yeah,
It's an art form in and of itself. You want a couple songs that will work as singles, not because of business reasons or labels or anything like that. Just it's kind of an interesting exercise as an artist to have an
Totally.
album that has like a couple of songs that are pretty obvious singles or a ballad or like the second to last song Tarmut, talk about like physical graffiti. I was getting like Kashmir and In the Light and the Eastern influences and all that mystical kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like there's an unspoken art form to that sequencing. You kind of put like, or at least for me, it's like you put the most ambitious, weirdest song, maybe second to last, third to last, and then you have like a kick-ass closer and a kick-ass opener, and
Yeah.
there's like an art form there. And I'm glad there's bands like still approaching it that way.
Yeah. And arguing about it internally for
Yeah.
months on
Dude,
end. And again, like that's why I love that Avi remembered that I was fighting for Cult of the Serpent Sun to open the record because I look back at that and being like I lost, man. All my songs were not picked for the order. But like thank you for remembering that, Avi. That's helpful.
Well, it's
My
funny. I had a similar experience, man, with the last Spirit Adrift album because
yeah,
to date, like most of them, I even when I'm demoing, I have like a certain approach where I kind of already know the sequencing of the album,
sure.
like
hmm
even as I'm demoing it. The last one, I I knew like what the first three songs were going to be in the last one or two. And Jeff Henson, who we were speaking about before we started recording, who just,
Yeah,
Mean Mistreater just put their record out. He made that
totally.
great record. But, talk about being like outspoken and just saying whatever the fuck he means. Jeff Henson's like, here's my track listing. And he switched the opening and closing song, which I
Ooh.
never in a million fucking years would have thought to do. And he moved, I don't think a single one of my songs was still in position. But you talk about maturing and realizing the power of collaboration. And I looked at it and I listened to it, and it was like, yeah, that's it.
That's the
So
record.
you were the guy for the opener. That's cool, man. Um, yeah, I was gonna talk about like specific songs, but I think we actually sort of ended up covering all of it. I always try to do some like goofy, arbitrary, like fun questions, and I was thinking of an appropriate one for today. And so I want to ask each of you, for the people listening, first of all, you got to check out this record. It's out, what, Friday the 14th,
March
right?
Yep.
14th. Correct.
So
Yes.
that'll be this episode's coming out that week. So this Friday, guys,
This Friday.
there's a link in the description, and please buy a copy, like stream it on Bandcamp or buy it on Bandcamp or whatever. But please buy a copy. Check it out. If you like it, buy a copy. That's the best way to support guys like us. And a lot of people lament the state of rock music and heavy music, but it's like, are you not paying attention? Like this is a classic to me. So go check it out, guys, if you haven't yet. But here's what I'm going to ask to the people who are just discovering Nite or just discovering Blackened heavy metal or whatever. Give them one black metal album and one like old school slash traditional metal album.
Okay. Well, if
Go
I'm,
for it.
if we're able to say first wave of black metal, I'm going to say Two Mega Therion by Celtic Frost for black metal. And for traditional metal, you know what? For a fan of Night, I think I'm going to have to say Powerslave by Iron Maiden.
I gotta go with Immortals at the Heart of Winter. Just such a classic black metal record. And you talk about like guitar melodies and composition and just like it has all the feelings I want from that style. Traditional heavy metal, I'm gonna go with maybe an obvious choice for Avi and I, but I'm gonna say Savatage, Gutter Ballet.
Oh
No
yeah.
way. I that's a Everybody says Hall of the Mountain King. That's a good one though.
We talk about Savatage a lot in this band, and it's something that has become again kind of a touchstone for us. Like we just there's something about that band and something about their career and the trajectory and the songwriting and like there's so many little like golden nuggets in all those Savatage records and Gutter Ballet is like just it's the first one that came to mind for me right now. So yeah.
It makes sense as a rhythm section too, because not only is the rhythm section good, but their guitar riffs are so good rhythmically. Most
Yeah.
guitarists think about the riff as what notes am I playing? And theirs are like they're great notes, obviously, but there's something about the rhythm of their guitar riffs that's so heavy.
Chris Oliva just wrote the toughest, gnarliest, like heaviest riffs that just also like it's like they jumped out of the speakers. There's just something like there's such amazing like personality in that and like yeah, to think like that dude fucking died when he was 30, right? Like what more would he have done, right? If he actually would have stuck around. It's
Yeah.
wild.
So there's something that Pat brings up all the time, and I think he said he probably learned it from a drum teacher of his, but it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play, right? And we think about that as a drummer or bass player, sure, but as a guitar player, Chris Oliva, like all those riffs, like down, 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 kind of thing, where he holds a note just a little bit longer. It creates so much tension and just such an attitude with it. And that was such a big Savatage signature that when Pat and I really like realized how much we love this band and how much it informed us as musicians, we were like, wow, what makes this band click? And like, how do we harness that? And so we came home and we were like, immediately, like, how do we bring this tonight? How do we like embody the spirit in our band too?
Harness the
Comes
power of the
across, man.
night.
The power of what?
Said harness the power of the night, making a terrible joke about
Right, right.
Sabotage record and the name of my band. I'll excuse
I'm
myself.
I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in too. I was thinking about how I felt about that question when I was listening to the record, and to me, it kind of gives me like Rotting Christ, Triarchy of the Lost Lovers, you know, which I think is my favorite black metal record. It's just there's so
Yeah.
it's like one long fucking hook, you know, tragic, epic hook from start to finish. That and for traditional metal, I almost feel like Defenders of the Faith or something, Judas Priest, that era, you know.
Yes.
So guys, if you're listening and you like any of those records, you're gonna love this Nite record. If you've heard the Nite record and you love that, then you're gonna love those records. What do you guys got coming up, man? The record comes out on Friday, and what's the plan?
We got a bunch of stuff coming up. I don't know if it'll be announced yet by the time this comes out.
Okay,
Will
yeah,
it?
don't worry about it. But you'll be touring and shit, I'm assuming.
We got some tour announcements coming up. I know that at one point our bands were potentially going to tour together.
Yeah, Europe, I think.
Didn't happen, yeah, Europe, but we should make that happen at some
I
point.
would, dude, any fucking time. We've been on a break for like it'll be almost 2 years by the
Holy
year and a
shit.
half.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, I did the Neon Nightmare shit,
yeah.
had a bunch of
Oh,
family stuff going on, but as of like yesterday, we're officially like cranking shit back up. So
cool.
need to get my shit together in the States, like behind the scenes and everything. We're doing some European stuff, but we will tour with you guys fucking anytime.
Awesome,
And
man. I
I'm
love
not
that.
just saying that. Like,
No, no, I appreciate it. I was stoked when it was going to happen potentially, and then it just for what I don't even remember why, but for whatever reason, it didn't go
that's
down. But
what
we should definitely
happens, man.
yeah, tour stuff is always that way. But yeah, we'll definitely be announcing some touring. We have a local show in the Bay Area for the album release show, which we're doing in April, and yeah, lots of stuff coming up. So just keep a lookout.
Cool. All right. Thank you guys so much, man, for the record and for the time today. Is there anything else you guys want to tell our listeners?
Thank you so, so much for all the positive feedback we've gotten. Thank you for listening. Like it's been a joy sharing all these singles and the record with everyone and just seeing how excited everyone is. It makes us so happy here in the Bay Area. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing. Thanks for the overwhelming amount of feedback we've gotten. I feel like our first single and video for this record, Crow Fear the Night, got more streams and views than anything we've ever done. And so that's a great sign of things to come. So we're just gonna keep doing what we're doing.
Hard work pays off, boys, and it's very obvious you guys worked real hard on this one. I love the record. Everybody check it out. Uh, Cult of the Serpent Sun, is that right?
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Unseasoned and missed.
It's the album to beat this year for me. I don't see it being beat. So everybody go check it out. Thank you guys.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Nate.